All right. What is going on, everybody? We got the three-man weave in the building. It's Will Weir. It's Greg Manakis. It's Taylor Gang. Adam Taylor. The three-man weave back in full effect. What's popping, fellas?
Yo, what's good? Sunday fun day with the boys with the three-man weave. Excited to
I
be
like
here.
to think I'm the only one here not hungover, which makes me really happy.
Wait, are you
I'm
hungover,
actually
Greg?
I'm no.
I didn't think you were.
Danielle,
Yeah.
yeah, Danielle came back from her trip where she got COVID again. The last two times she
Oh,
went
shoot.
for
I
a
didn't know
trip.
that. Sorry to
Yeah,
hear.
so she was away for an entire like 10 days because she got COVID while she was gone for the weekend. So she came back. She's still like in semi quarantine right now. So I don't know if people that are listening right now, if you'll hear her occasionally coughing up a lung in the background, but that's happening.
Yeah, we're
You
doing this
see,
live. We're going to edit that. We're going to make sure you get all the phlegm coming through the audio here.
you see, for me, it's like if Will's hungover, I'm like, well, Greg's hungover too. Like I
It's the
just
hive
assume,
mind. You just
yeah.
assume, we're one and the same. That's how it's been for 30 plus years. If it's happening to one of us, there's a good chance it's happening to both of us. But just me on this one, slightly hungover, not too bad. Out celebrating a few friends' birthdays last night. Went to the Austin FC soccer game, which I'll talk more about later. Just a little tease right there. But for this episode, just to set us up real quick. So at the front half of this pod, you will have already heard Greg and I recapping the Spurs Celtics game that is happening Sunday night, as Greg mentioned. Sunday Fun Day recording. We're recording this during the day here. But we wanted to get the three-man weave together. Green with envy. This is how we do moving forward. The three-man weave. We move as one. We are a unit. And speaking of units, Robert Williams. Robert Williams is back in the lives of all Boston Celtics fans. If you're looking for some content, go over to Celtics blog. Our guy always got a shout out. Bill Sy, the Celtics guy, the Robert Williams effect. He has an article up on Celtics blog right now talking about the impact Robert Williams has had. He's been back for 2 games, will have been 3 games by the time that you're hearing this. And something that we've touched on in past podcasts, but with Adam in the mix, I want to bring you in on this, Adam. This is something that, pre-production meeting here, we were trying to figure out what the best way to talk about this is. But since Robert Williams has come back, he's come off the bench. So here's kind of the question that I think we should start with, and we can go whichever way we want from here. But is this the role that Robert Williams should be destined for the rest of this season, coming off the bench?
For the rest of this season, for sure. I mean, I've been quite vocal about having Al Horford as your 5 so he can space the floor, drag big men away from the paint, and then having 4 ball handlers around him, right? So you got Tatum, Brown. My preference is Smart and White when everybody's healthy. That's 4 decision makers, 4 guys that can score across all 3 levels, or at least 2 of the levels in like Smart's case. You want him around the rim or you want him into perimeter. If Marcus Smart starts jacking up mid-range shots, I'm going to lose my damn mind. But outside of that, I think that makes the most sense. Rob's really good at bringing energy, altering the way players look to attack the paint. And if you can do that 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes into the first, and then start to incorporate him into the rotation, giving Al Horford some additional rest, going double big when you need to, that makes more sense for me. I think at the moment, one of Rob's biggest issues is clearly health. He's played 30 games this season, 31 if he manages to play unscathed against San Antonio. That to me tells me that maybe they should operate with Rob the same way they've operated with Brogdon this year, where you're clearly capable of being a starter skill set wise, but for health reasons, for longevity of the season, for keeping you where we need you to be, a bench role just might be the best option for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's crazy to think about the Celtics depth right now, right? They have their 8-man rotations pretty much set. The starting 5 with Rob coming off the bench along with Brogdon and Grant being that 8th man. We're probably plugging in Sam Hauser as the 9th man in a pinch, or if you just need to switch things up with an extra shooter on the floor. But I think with Rob, we have 7 starters, as you just said, Adam. Malcolm Brogdon could be a starter in any other situation. Robert Williams has been a starter and should be a starter if he was healthy. So the Boston Celtics actually have about 7 guys on the current roster that could be starters. So when you bring in Robert Williams and Malcolm Brogdon as the first 2 off the bench, you're really just having a new iteration of a starting 5. That's not a bench lineup by any means. So I love the versatility that having Rob come off the bench brings you. Having double big has not really worked this season, especially with last season's starting five, just because I think it's a little bit clunky on the offensive end with Smart as the point guard. I think you'll see a little bit more of Missoula experimenting with White at the point guard with those other four guys, maybe a little Brogdon. We saw that a couple games ago where we saw double big lineups, but it really wasn't with Smart on the court. So I don't expect the starting five to have the double big in most situations. With a Giannis on the other end of the court and a Brook Lopez, maybe we'll see something different in that upcoming Bucks game. But I think for the most part, Rob Williams should come off the bench.
I think you touched on a word that was jumping out to me as Adam was talking, and then you said the word. I was thinking versatility. I think that's the most important piece of what Rob coming off the bench gives you. And to your point, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I'm pretty sure if you just replace Marcus Smart and Derek White, that 5-man lineup actually does have some pretty good numbers right now with their offensive and defensive rating splits and what that net rating comes out to. And the other part with Rob that it's a little bit more subjective, but I'm curious to get y'all's thoughts on it is, and I feel like in the Indiana game, he's only played, I think 15, 16 minutes in the Indiana game, but it felt like the fear was back a little bit. You know, his activity level was high, and it was a little bit of, I don't know where Rob is coming from. And I think when you get into the playoffs, you know, this isn't for Giannis or Embiid. They're not scared of shit. That's not for them. It's for Pat Connaughton. It's for George Niang when they don't know where Rob Williams is coming from. And so, you know, those utility players that are there to aid those superstars, that's where I think Rob can play a really meaningful role, especially if he's only playing, you know, somewhere between 20 to 25 minutes, maybe coming off the bench, maybe even a little bit less, depending on the game, the matchup, what's needed. But he can almost play, you know, you have to always, you know, be concerned with the injuries. And like we said, I think we said this last time, he needs a landing coach, just like lethal shooters a shooting coach. He needs a landing coach because I get nervous every single time he goes up in the air and he comes down. But, you know, he can play with a little bit more reckless abandon. And that's, you know, to that versatility point, that's a new utilization that I don't think we've seen enough of this year. And I was excited for, you know, watching that Indiana game that we might be getting a little bit more of that Rob back, where it's a little bit of controlled chaos into the game.
Yeah, I think with Rob, not only is he striking fear in the heart of the opponent, but he's inspiring confidence. He's inspiring bravery with his own teammates. You know, the ability for the Boston Celtics to understand that Robert Williams has their back, playing that rover position on the back line of the defense that Ime established last year. I think you'll see more, and Adam, you can speak to this a little bit more with the article you just wrote, but it'll embolden our perimeter defenders to really get up and guard the ball and get into the jerseys of the other team because they know that Robert Williams is there on the back line. There's a huge difference between having Robert Williams on the back line than having Blake Griffin on the back line, who's a great positional defender, can take charges, but he's basically like a 6'9" Kyle Lowry at this point. You know what I mean? Like all he can do is take charges. And with Robert Williams there to, like you saw in the last game, 16 minutes, 8 rebounds, 3 steals, 3 blocks. And then those blocks were loud. He blocked one of them with basically his elbow. I think he had another one where he blocked it 2 times on the same block. Like there's just things that Robert Williams does on the back line that nobody else on the team can do. And that's what I think having Rob back in the lineup, whether it's starting or off the bench, is going to bring to this team.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm kind of in complete agreement with you. If you listen to the way some of the Celtics players spoke about Rob at the end of last season, where they're like, he's the insurance policy. You can gamble more on on defense when Rob's patrolling the back line. You can jump out at guys more. You can switch a bit heavier, knowing that if you get beat off the dribble or if you get beat from coming over a screen, that Rob's going to be there to mop things up for you. But I think what I liked the most against Indiana was the way Will put it. It was controlled chaos, right? Like there's a play where I think it's in the 4th quarter. You see Tyrese Halliburton go to fire a pass over the top of Rob, and Rob's just like, no, I'm going to deflect it, snatch it out the air, then I'm going to run the floor with it. In fact, I've got it here. Shall I play the play? I've actually got it ready to. I've got it lined up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Get that to go. We saw last season what happened with Milwaukee in that last game of the year, sitting all of their guys, not getting the #1 seed. I don't think they're going to make that mistake again this season.
First of all, I don't understand why you're trying to go over the top on Robert Williams. Most importantly, Rob's defending on the perimeter more. He's not being placed in the corner as much. I know that I was talking to Keith Smith about this recently, and one of the reasons Keith gave was teams have got wise to that. So they're switching out, they're putting their weak shooter in the corner, and then they're kind of running a screening action and putting an actual legitimate shooter in the corner. And now Rob can't help off of them because it's a genuine kick out threat rather than a poor shooter. So Mazzulla seems to kind of like be looking at ways to counteract that by putting Rob on the perimeter and using his size to deter the 3-point shot, force guys to drive in, at which point everyone's going to kind of collapse. But I just really like the way that Rob's been more active. That was arguably his best game of the season as well. I know there's only 30 of them to choose from, but it was definitely one of his best games of the season. Overall, though, I just think coming off the bench, he's going to be able to give you a lot more impact because no one's going to be worried about the minutes, the wear and tear. And as disingenuous to other teams as this might be, he's going against a little bit of lesser talent.
Yeah, and that's a huge advantage for the Celtics. And, you know, a little bit of a side note here. I was rewatching all of his blocks and steals from that Indiana game. Rob Williams, after he gets the steal, it's a bit of an adventure. You don't really know what's gonna happen. It's great at the start, but it's a real gamble as to what's gonna happen after he actually gets control of that basketball.
I want to see like how Rob sees the court. Like I literally want to see it from his perspective because when he gets a steal, he gets a rebound, the ball is out of his hands faster than any guy in the league. It's crazy. I don't know if it's just like the first like glimpse of green that he gets, he's just throwing it to that thing. But one of the things I just want to touch on real quick with Rob coming off the bench, I think what this does allow is for the Celtics to play the best guys, right? If Rob is coming, if Rob is starting, then I think what's going to happen as we mess around here with the layout, I think what's happening is that the big man rotation gets a little messed up because we're starting both of the bigs in the starting lineup there. So like maybe you go to a Grant Williams too early in the game, or, you know, maybe Sam Hauser ends up on the court when he really shouldn't be on the court, you know, in a big game. Maybe Luke Cornett ends up on the court. I think if you split Rob and Al's minutes pretty much evenly down the middle, our best guys and our best playmakers are all of our guards, the Jays, Marcus Smart, Malcolm Brogdon, Derek White. So playing one big at a time allows for having our 4 best players on the court at all times.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I'm like, who's going? I like the idea of having multiple ball handlers, and I feel like I've kind of been swayed by this as well, just to sort of flex. I remember speaking with, and this is a very subtle flex that's not so subtle at this point. I remember speaking with George Karl about this about 2 years ago, and he was like, hey, the more wings and ball handlers you can have on the floor in the modern NBA, the more chance you've got of success. And when you've got a team like the Celtics that are just littered with guys that are pure decision makers, everyone can play in that 0.5 offense, or as you guys I like to call it, that 0.5 offense. It makes everything so much more difficult to guard because so many players that can make decisions and create actions, just the unpredictability factor. Now I found throughout this season when they've ran double big, because Mazzulla's so much more push the pace on and put pace and space offensively than what Ime Udoka was, that double big lineup seems to be having negative effects. You know, like the spacing's felt a little bit forced. Putting Rob anywhere away from the rim is just allowing teams to sag off and double team elsewhere or dig or do whatever. So I just feel like the best opportunity you've got is bringing him off the bench and then reevaluating how you want to approach your starting 5 during the off season. Maybe it's time for Al to take that bench role and Rob becomes your starting big man then. Or maybe Rob's best bet for the rest of his career is to come off the bench if it's going to prove to give him an actual career instead of just being really, really comfortable with whoever the doctors and surgeons are.
Yeah, and you know, with these last 2 games, and like we said, we're recording this before the Spurs game. So you'll have Greg and I's thoughts at the front end of this podcast. You know, it's been 2 games after what was Adam and I went through this in our last podcast. It was a bit of an up and down road trip, which on the whole 4-2 is still a pretty damn good road trip, but it didn't feel great at certain times. And so you look to the Kings game, which we talked about, real strong momentum to build off. Pacers game, and it feels like over those last 2 games, that defensive identity, which goes hand in hand with all of this Robert Williams discussion that we're having right now, feels like it's coming back around. And, you know, Adam, you have an article up on Celtics blog right now, which, by the way, fantastic title. Give me your lunch money, a new Celtics mentality. I think kind of speaks to that. So could you just talk a little bit about the article that you got up right now?
Yeah, so what happened was I wrote words and then I inputted clips and then people read it. No, jokes aside. And that's just me being a douche. I do apologize. So mainly for the most part, the article was based around steals. So over the last 2 games, the Celtics got 9 steals against the Kings, they got 11 against the Pacers, that totals 20. That's just something for me that the student has become the teacher. If you go back last season, the season before, the Celtics have had problems in retaining possession in high pressure situations. You look at how the Warriors kind of forced multiple fumbles down the stretch in the NBA Finals as an example. And it just feels like the Celtics are kind of turning a corner there. If you look at the way they played defense against the Pacers, they were still doing very similar things. They were dropping. Al Horford was in drop, but they were sending their wings to kind of like hedge or kind of like pinch, where they both coming from either side to take away the paint and then sprinting back out. Now, Rob wasn't on the floor for all of those moments, but what has happened is with having the ability to bring Rob off the bench, with having the luxury of having a Muscala or a Blake or whatever, you can play at a little bit higher pace, because when you guys get tired, there's enough depth there that you could sub out and not really have too much of a drop off in talent, apart from obviously when Tatum or Brown go to the bench. That was pretty much the crux of the article. It was just about how they really pressured ball handlers. They forced bad decisions and they won their 50-50 balls. They were diving on the floor. They were sprinting to wherever the ball was rolling out to. It was just a high energy performance, and it was the closest we've seen to last season's Celtics on defense all year. In my opinion, it was one of the most coherent defensive performances, where everybody was playing their role, but they were also going that one step further. And it just makes a load of sense with the way Missoula wants them to play, to have this type of defensive mentality where, yeah, we're going to have someone in drop, but we're going to send 1 or 2 over to the post, and we're going to pinch in at that post as well. So you're not going to want to try and drive the gap, and you're not going to want to try and attack the dropping big, because it means you've got to get through 2 guys that are quite long with good wingspan. So you're going to kick it out, then we're going to rotate, and we're going to force you to F up pretty much.
Yeah, one thing. Remember, Adam, you can swear now, so you could say.
Oh, they're going to force you to fuck up.
Yeah, one thing I noticed in that Kings game, obviously that was coming off of the Celtics, one of the worst losses of the season against the Jazz, even though we were down both of our big men. Grant Williams, his ability to play his role in that Kings game. I think that was the game where he had that big play where he dove on the floor to grab that loose ball. Mm-hmm. There have been a few more of those types of plays by the Celtics since that Jazz game, where maybe we can call that the nadir of the season, however you want to say that. Nadir.
Is that like the Knicks game last year?
Yeah, exactly. Right. There was that galvanizing moment where everyone just had to kind of look at themselves and be like, are these really games we're losing just because we're, quite frankly, being lazy? They got lazy on that road trip, and they recommitted to just being focused for 48 minutes the last few games. And there are plenty of quotes from players talking about how they committed to a full 48 effort. And that's the thing that we need to see out of this team. It doesn't matter if you're playing the Spurs as they are later today, or if you're playing the Bucks as they are later this week. They need to be locked in and start building those habits. We talked about this with Joe Mazzulla. He needs to be locked in as a coach and building his habits as a coach. I think he's been much better of late, calling his timeouts and, trying to be a little bit more intentional with his rotations. And I think that's what the entire team just has to focus over these last 8 or 9 games, however many are left in the season. It's all about developing habits, or, rediscovering the habits that they began the season with. Now, where is that team? Is it back for good? Are we going to see that for the last 8 games of the season going into the playoffs?
So with that, let's actually take a look, because like you said, there is, not counting counting the Spurs game, there's 8 games. By the time that game's done, we're down to 7. I don't know how the fuck we got here, but there's 2 weeks left in the regular season. It doesn't, when we were doing our pre-production meeting, I was kind of looking through the schedule, and it just didn't seem to make sense to me that by this time, next week, we're in the final stretch of the season. We're in the final week of the season. And so with that, let's take a look at what the Celtics have coming up. Last night, Celtics got a pretty big gift, Nuggets took down the Bucks, a game that the Celtics really need a little bit of the Bucks to do some damage to themselves, aside from obviously just playing the Celtics basketball that we're describing now. And you can see, if you're watching us here on YouTube, you can see obviously playing the Spurs, then the Wizards, and then there's that big showdown, Milwaukee with a Utah back-to-back at home on the back end of that. And so as we look to the week ahead, right now, the Celtics are 2 games back of the Bucks, and the Sixers, who have a really tough schedule the rest of the way, they now have a 2-game cushion on that 2 seed. So they're 2 games behind the Bucks, 2 games ahead of the 76ers. Looking at the week ahead here, Adam, let's start with you, and feel free to take this, not just Celtics related. You can look at it kind of league wide, because we're scoreboard watching at this point. This is all about, holistically, who are the Celtics? What's the Celtics path, like we talked about, to get back to the Eastern Conference Finals and eventually the NBA Finals, as well as, trying to jockey for position with Milwaukee. So what are you kind of looking for this week, either Celtics-wise or from a league-wide perspective?
Yeah, I'd like to believe that the Celtics can regain that first slot. If you're looking at the standings right now, Celtics finish second. They're probably going to face the
tight
Heat
there.
Yeah, if it was to finish today, I'm taking Miami over Atlanta, then Miami. So I'd like to say the Celtics at least tie up with the Bucks. Maybe Milwaukee drop another game, and then they face Boston, and Boston be able to beat them. Otherwise than that, I'd like to just keep Philadelphia at arm's length. I'd prefer to finish in the top 2, just because there's some home court seed in there that comes into play further down the line. Other than that, I'm kind of chill. I'd like Miami to move into that 6th seed personally. So then that's a Philly problem. And then that would make me very happy, actually. Other than that, I'm pretty cool. I'd like, as far as I'm concerned, if you can beat San Antonio, if you can beat Washington, whatever happens against Milwaukee happens. Beat Utah, then that's a 3-on-1 week, and that's a successful week for me when you're facing arguably your biggest rival in the entire Eastern Conference. Would I like Celtics to beat them? Yeah. Are they going to? We'll find out.
Yeah, we got a big gift last night because the Bucks lost and the Sixers lost. And the 76ers are now in a 2-game losing streak. James Harden has been out the last couple of games. I don't know how much longer he's going to be out for. But for the Sixers to catch us at this point, it's a long shot, to be honest. They're 2 games back with 8 games to play. So I would imagine the Celtics end up with that 2 seed. Obviously, I'd love the 1 seed as well. We didn't get a gift, though, on the other side of things last night, because the Nets actually destroyed the Heat in the second half. I think they outscored them by 25 points or something in the third quarter of last night's game after the Heat were up early in that one. So, whether the Celtics end up against the Nets, the Heat, or the Hawks, because that's pretty much what it seems like it's going to come down to. As we said, we're not worried about any of those teams. We're not going to lose to any of those teams. It's just the idea of the attrition that might occur because of the matchup that we end up in, right? If we're going up against the Nets, that's probably a 5-game series. Same thing with the Hawks. The Heat, we probably beat them in 6 or 7. Probably, I would imagine 6, though, because the Heat aren't that good this year. But with the Bucks game coming up on Thursday, I was watching that Nuggets-Bucks game last night, and one of the things that stood out to me is just the amount that the Bucks kind of need Giannis to do everything. I know that might seem obvious. Giannis obviously is one of the best players in the league, but Chris Middleton, I know there's been some talk about him being back, and the Bucks are 24-4 since he came back, but he doesn't look like the same guy. And this is something, Will, you and I touched on briefly, is that in the past matchups with the Bucks last season, notwithstanding because Middleton missed it, Middleton arguably was the 3rd best player in that series. Giannis number 1, Tatum number 2, and then it comes down to who's next, right? And I think Chris Middleton could have made that argument that he was the 3rd best player. I feel like Jaylen Brown has surpassed him at this point, especially with the way Middleton has played, just his athleticism on the offensive end and defensive end. That's something that Middleton used to take pride in, was how versatile he was on the defensive end and how versatile he was in that pick and roll action with Giannis. I don't really see that out of Middleton this year. So if Jaylen now becomes the 3rd best player, maybe Drew is the 4th best player, Middleton is the 5th or 6th best player. If the Celtics have 2 of the top 3 in that series, I feel pretty good about how we match up with the Bucks. So if Middleton's not who Middleton was, I think the Bucks are in trouble for a matchup against us.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, because I was also thinking about this morning with Chris Middleton, because on the season right now, in his 29 games he's played, the record's great. but it's 15 points. It's 4.2 rebounds, 5 assists. Those are fine. But he's shooting 43% from the field and 32% from three. Those aren't Chris Middleton numbers. And on top of it, the eye test backs that up, that it's not the same Chris Middleton. And it made me think a little bit, because he's obviously dealt with multiple injuries before the season, throughout the season. It's kind of been flaring up on him. But it makes me think a little bit like Klay Thompson last year, right? Where the Warriors playoff run kind of hinged on, are we going to get enough from Klay Thompson? And I kind of feel like we're getting the same thing with Chris Middleton right now, because I think that is the big linchpin to what's going to happen with the Bucks. Because otherwise, there's as great as Giannis is, which cannot be understated or overstated enough. Like, if there's that much on his plate that Chris Middleton can't come in over a 7-game series, especially against a team, like the Celtics, or if the Sixers are at full strength that have equal or, just about the same level of talent, like that's going to end up, playing a massive role. And to your point, Greg, I think it's hard not to say that, Jaylen Brown has certainly passed Chris Middleton, this version of Chris Middleton that we're seeing this year. And that could be a factor that I think helped propel the Celtics in a 7-game series, is the fact that now you might be looking at this as, well, Celtics have 2 out of the 3 best players in this series. They don't have the best, but they've got 2 and 3 right there. And so that could be a massive difference. I'm really looking forward to the matchup this week, because I think it's going to be a big time playoff atmosphere. And I think it's going to be a really good test to see, how it's like 2 prize fighters kind of eyeing each other down and see what strategies each one is kind of coming up with, or what they want to reveal right now, knowing that there's probably an even bigger fight coming down the road.
Yeah, for sure. And I think with the first thing I want to see in that Bucks matchup is, does Mazzulla make an adjustment to the starting lineup to match up with their double bigs, or does he try and play Brook Lopez off the court, right? Because the way that the Bucks play defense, Brook Lopez is in that deep drop. They try and funnel everybody towards Brook Lopez so that they have these 2 7-foot behemoths on the back line with Giannis and Lopez that are just protecting everything at the rim. And if the Celtics can exploit them in the mid-range or get them into rotations, force Lopez to guard a little bit more out on the perimeter, or take advantage of that deep drop by having Horford hit the 3-pointer, I think we can very quickly get them out of that double big lineup, which in my opinion is their most effective defensive lineup. Then they have to go Giannis at the 5 with Bobby Portis out there. Jay Crowder hasn't played too much this season, but maybe there's a lineup in which Jay Crowder plays small ball 5. There's a bunch of different options that the Bucks have now, but I think the first thing I want to see is, what do the Celtics do to get them out of their preferred 5? And I think the Celtics will be able to do that if we trust our guns and go for smalls with Al at the center, and then have Rob come off the bench and play double big as needed. Maybe you start the second half with the double big lineup. But one thing, and I know we've talked about this, I don't want to make a big deal about it, but like, there might be a time in which, against a certain matchup, Derek White needs to be either in the starting lineup as the point guard, or start in the second half as the point guard with Smart coming off the bench. That's just something to consider. I wonder if Mazzulla would ever go to that. I doubt it. Adam, any thoughts on that? Do you think Mazzulla would ever be so bold as to play the Celtics' third best player as the third best player?
Mazzulla scares me, so I'm going to say yes. I think that, first of all, I want to touch on that big man thing. So one of the things that you guys pointed out after the Sacramento game was that Mazzulla went to an 8-man rotation, right? And we saw something very similar against Indiana. I would definitely not be too surprised if, when they play Milwaukee later this week, we see Mazzulla go a bit deeper, maybe to 10, maybe to 11, and just throw bodies, throw different looks at Giannis, right? Regardless of whether they go double big or single big, I'd expect maybe we see a little bit of Blake Griffin in there. Maybe we see some additional Grant Williams minutes. Maybe they throw in Mike Muscala, Luke Cornett, whoever it may be. I'd expect to see that big man rotation look more like a carousel. So we can, so just, it's data gathering, right? It's finding out who does well against Embiid, who can get in front of him and take the banging, like the body blows. I'm about to sound like Charles Barkley then. Who can, who works out building a wall well. Like, there's a lot of different data points that he might want to just get some final looks at. So that would be a game where I'd expect the rotation to expand. With that being said, using Boston's third best player as their third best player, well, that seems too logical for me to assume that it's going to happen. What a concept. Yeah, like, it's too logical, right? Like, no. I don't think that happens at any point between now and the end of the regular season.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a big regular season test for Joe Mazzulla this upcoming week. And we'll have more for y'all later this week. We're going to have some preview pods. We just had our whole pre-production. I mean, we got a lot of content coming out this week. So make sure you're hitting us or following along with us across all of our social medias. But for this episode, now it's time to do what Greg and I, typically it's just Greg and I, but now we got the 3-man weave. So we got to indoctrinate our guy, Adam Taylor, into our weekly segment called Vibe Check.
Okay, so was you going to tell me to go?
I was going to tell you to go. So you look at that. We on the same. We already connecting like that, Adam. We don't got. I don't got to say anything. I just got to shoot you a look, and you know to roll. You know to pop. We got that connection going right now.
Yeah, I'm telling you, man. It's not like have we podcasted together before? It feels that way. Maybe
so. We did it once with legs too. That was fun.
That was brilliant. Podcasting with legs. That was one of my favorite quotes of the entire trip. So my vibe check this week is a TV show called Empire, a very old school TV show. I think it started in like 2016, 2017. My wife had it on one day, and I was like, when you're just grumpy, like I don't know what I want to watch. There's a bunch of stuff, but I've seen it all before. And then I've come downstairs, like, because I've been searching on like Netflix and stuff in my office. I come downstairs, my wife's watching this Empire. I'm like, I ain't really feeling this. It's episode 3 at this point. She's like, no, let me start it from the beginning. So she started it from the beginning. That was about 10 days ago, 12 days ago. There's 6 seasons, quite a few episodes each season, an hour each episode. I'm going to be wrapping up season 4 by Monday. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you do. If you have seen it, I highly recommend you go back and watch it again.
I love just the idea of having a spouse who's down to start a show from the beginning, even though they've seen like a couple seasons of it. If there's like, I'll go back with you. I'll watch it from the beginning with you. I think that's just a sign of a very healthy relationship. So shout out Zoe.
Yeah, I mean,
that takes a lot to be able to commit to that, or it's that good of a show. Because there are shows where, I'd be like, yeah, you watch it on your own time, But there are some shows where it's like, oh, I'm excited to do a rewatch of this, and it sounds like y'all found that with Empire.
Yeah, it's dope, dude. I mean, she's just started watching yesterday The Last of Us, and like, full disclosure, I tried to play the computer game The Last of Us, and like the very opening thing, his daughter dies, right? And I remember being like, I'm a girl dad. I'm like, I don't want to play this game no more, and I boycotted the game simply because of that opening scene. So when I came in yesterday and she's watching Last of Us, I'm like, well, I boycotted the game. I'm a little bit of a I don't want to cross the picket line to watch the TV show, right? But according to her, I'm going to have to become a scab and cross that picket line because apparently it's really, really good.
I will say, Adam, I think it's one of the better TV shows. I've watched too much TV since 2020, so I can't even keep track of, what's been good and what's not been good. But this is one of the shows that is definitively, over the last three plus years or so, where things are just blended together, that sticks out above the rest. Like there's been stuff where I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that was good. I can't tell you much about it. That show freaking rocks. So I highly recommend that you get on board with The Last of Us.
She's going to have to wait till Empire finishes.
All right, Greg, let's go over to you. What's your vibe check this week?
So I don't know if Adam actually watches the NCAA tournament, but I am vibing with my guy Marquise Noel. Although they got eliminated from the tournament last night
by the mighty Florida Atlantic Owls. I want to say
sounds right. Some sort of bird.
Yeah.
The
Florida Atlantic
insert
creature. Bird here.
Yeah, Noel was unreal, dude. I didn't watch much college basketball because really at this point I only have time for the tournament. So I tuned in for the tournament this year, and the first time I watched that dude play, he was electric. I don't know if he has any NBA future in him. Kind of reminds me of a little bit Tremont Waters type player where he might get one contract. I love
that's your boy. You cannot let it's Tremont Waters for you, Romeo Langford for Adam. You guys are just connected forever with those two.
Exactly. I think Marquise Noel, he's 5'8". I don't know if you saw any of him, Adam. 5'8", but has one of the craziest floor visions I've ever seen of any point guard, especially of a guy that size. He had 18 or 19 assists in one of the games.
19 against Little Hauser in Michigan State.
Yeah, against Little. I think at one point during the game last night, he had like 47 scored or assisted on 47 of the 56 points up at like a certain point of the game. This guy was everything. And it was so upsetting that he didn't make it to the Final Four because he was one of the big reasons why I was enjoying watching the tournament. But dude, I loved watching Marquise Noel. Shout out to you, my guy. I hope you get drafted.
Yeah, I only caught the Michigan State game, but this guy was electric. Like that game was intense. And, so have you guys seen the clip going around? I want to get your thoughts about, was it a play call or was it not a play call on that alley-oop? I don't know if it was in overtime or at the end of the second half, where he's arguing with his coach back and forth about the play call. And then midway through them arguing, throws an alley-oop to a guy who cuts baseline, reverse jams it. And this is, I think it was at the end of the second half. Or it was overtime. It was like a minute left. Like this is not a time to be messing around.
It's pretty much the game-winning bucket.
Yeah, it was the game-winning bucket. He throws the oop from the logo. All like it was just insane to
catch
watch.
It, reverse jam, like.
So you know the play I'm talking about, Greg. Do you think that was an actual play call?
Okay, so when I played at Boston Latin School, we had a very similar play that we used to do, and it was just Christian is confused. Shout out to my guy Christian Anuha. So I would take the ball out of bounds, and we'd be yelling at Christian to get into in position. Christian was like one of two guys on our team that could dunk, and he looked like this on the court, and he couldn't see very well, so he was always squinting anyway. So we would just like call this play Christian's confused, and he'd literally look around like this, and the coach would be yelling at him, and then he'd get a back screen and I'd throw him an alley-oop. It worked like 3 times. So we've run a play very similar to that in my past basketball experience. I couldn't tell though, but the fact that I know that these types of plays exist, it's like, the Rob Flynn, where's the ball?
I was about to bring this up.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Adam, Greg and I had a guy, Rob Flynn, who we grew up with. And I know you don't know a ton about baseball, but I do know you've been picking up bits and pieces here.
Bits and pieces, yeah.
Yeah. So he was the catcher for like our little league team, and he'd always have this play where he would pretend like when the ball got pitched that it got by him. And so he'd turn around behind him and he'd kind of like freak out. And so he'd get the runner to think, oh, it's the ball's like at the backstop, time for me to take off. And then he'd turn around and throw him out. I think it worked like twice, but the theatrics that went with it will last a lifetime because it's just ingrained in my memory of him doing this.
He came up with this when we were like 9 years old.
And he did it all the way until we were playing like in the senior league or whatever, like on the Babe Ruth diamond. And I still remember he wasn't doing his trick, but a guy did try to steal. This is when we were older. We're probably like 15 years old at this point. And we're not I don't think he played baseball at the same level like Greg and I did, like in high school and stuff like that. So this was like kind of like a more like community level team. And a guy was trying to steal third. I'm playing third base. Greg's backing me up because he's the shortstop. And this guy, Rob, yells out as in the middle of the play, "Where do you think you're going?" And then proceeds to throw the ball. So there's 90 feet between home plate and third base to where he needs to throw this ball. I think he threw it 40 feet. He threw it 40 feet. It bounced over my head. And then Greg caught it on one knee, laughing in the ground. And it was such a perfect moment. It was just, I don't know, that was great.
It was the accent you just did then. Where do you think you're going? I haven't seen the clip, so I cannot confirm nor deny whether I believe it's a play call. I'm going to go with play call because that just makes me believe there's magic still in the world. Kind of like, do you remember the movie Angels on the Outfield?
It could happen.
Yeah. Do you remember that movie?
Of course.
And there was I'm going to go with Angels in the Outfield. Yes, it was a play call. Magic still exists.
Adam, another great just like play call wrinkle that Florida Atlantic does is when they do inbounds plays and end of game situations, they go like full American football formation where they have the one guy serving as the quarterback and they have the other 4 guys lined up on the baseline and they have all of them just run full speed straight lines,
just verticals,
and then there's just one guy that cuts underneath in like a slant route, so they get him the ball and they create all this space and they avoid trapping. I've never seen it before and I thought it was genius.
I need to watch these guys play, man. This sounds like I'd have such a good time.
Yeah, March Madness is fun, man. Like Greg, I don't have as much time to really watch college basketball.
It's too much, man. It's like every 10 seconds there's a game.
Yeah, it's a lot to follow. There's so many teams across the country, but March Madness still, I think, the best sports tournament at least in the US, because I think the World Cup probably takes the cake.
No, the World Cup sucks because that's soccer, so that sucks.
Well, that's actually a great transition. This brings me to my vibe check of the week. So I mentioned, I think at the beginning of this, I went to the Austin FC MLS game last night, which, by the way, Adam, I'm gonna have to send you this picture later. Our guy Greg actually spends his free weekends moonlighting as one of the lead supporters in the cheering crowd. I got to send you. I'm gonna send out this picture when we send out this podcast. But there's a guy who leads the supporting section for Austin FC, leading all the chants, who is to a T just Greg, but 150 pounds, and it is a spot on replica. Like his mannerisms, everything about this guy lines up. And I think, Greg, are you pulling up the picture right now?
Oh, I am.
All right,
let's
get this on the screen here. See if I don't know if we might need to zoom in a little bit here. See if we can get that pulled up.
He's now known as Ibiza Greg. That's
so
Ibiza Greg, man.
This is Austin FC Greg right here. And so my vibe check of the week is that we need more supporter sections like we have at the Austin FC game. And so, Adam, I wanted to ask you, I know you might have more insight on this than I do with English soccer league teams. I mean, I know it's just more intense with the hooligans and they have all these different chants, but do they have, when you go to a game, a specific section that is like designated just for like super passionate fans that lead these chants? Or is that just the whole arena is doing that because it's kind of ingrained in the system?
Okay, so I honestly couldn't tell you yes or no because I've never been to a game.
Yeah, I just figured you might have more insights.
From what I'm aware, it's everybody. So you have a family section where obviously things are a little bit more chill, a little bit more calm. If violence happens in that section, you've just been unfortunate, right? Mm-hmm. The rest of it is you've got your away section, your home section. The rest of it is just wild people. So the chants are everywhere. It can start from anywhere. Usually there's a bit more of a vibe going around by the season tickets, because those guys are like your diehards.
Yeah,
a lot of the season ticket holders travel to away and home games all year round. So you'll see a lot of people like this, like IB for Greg here, everywhere in a soccer stadium. Yeah, generally it's like what you probably experienced at Austin FC is probably like a good replica on a smaller scale of what you'd experience at an English soccer stadium.
And this is my vibe because we need more of this in basketball arenas, in baseball stadiums, in football stadiums. We need that crowd, that section that is designed just to go nuts, to be leading the chants, to be bringing the energy, the momentum. When, you'd have to figure out what it is, but when a goal's scored, let's throw that beer in the air. Let's throw that water in the air. Let's get nuts. Let's get weird. Let's do it. We don't have that enough in American sports. We need that for when in the second half of a game, the Celtics are coming down. You have this massive green supporter section that is going nuts. We need more of that. And it's a very cheap ticket. It's not necessarily family friendly because it gets pretty lit, it gets pretty loose in there. Although there are kids in there who are just, hey, if you're with it, you're with it, but know that that's like what you're getting into. And I don't know. I really enjoy the atmosphere of it because I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't follow soccer. I barely know what's going on. So I'm just there for the straight vibes. And it's such a great time. And I think it needs to be brought into other sports here in the States.
Yeah, I agree, dude. Go ahead, Adam.
No, I was just going to say the soccer kind of experience, like, that type of mentality all through Europe is something that all of the diehards kind of point to, right? Like I know people that are like, yeah, I love soccer. Well, football here. I love football, but I can never watch it at home. I can either watch it in the pub with a bunch of other crazy nut jobs, or I need to be in the stadium with 20, 30, 50, 60, 70,000 nut jobs. But I know a bunch of people that are like, yeah, I love football, but I can't watch it on TV because there's no nutters around me and I need the atmosphere to feed on. I've been to a few NBA games now. I've been to a few other sports around England, like, ice hockey and whatever. And it honestly doesn't compare to what you hear and see on TV from like soccer stadiums.
I would love for a basketball team to try this out.
Yeah.
Right. There's got to be some small market team that needs to increase their in-game attendance, just like some sort of gimmick. Why not try this out? I think it's a great idea, Will. I don't think it could ever happen at TD Garden, just because there's so much, there's like a history to to the way that the crowd interacts with the game that we've talked about. I mean, I would love to see it happen. I just don't think it's realistic for it to happen.
Yeah.
But like for the Charlotte Hornets or the Oklahoma City Thunder, like we've
I think
been
the
to
Thunder were the first team, because you and I went to
Exactly.
the playoff. It was the last Kevin Durant game for the Oklahoma City Thunder, or one of the last ones when they went up. The last win he ever had with Oklahoma City Thunder, actually, we were there for, because they went up 3-1 on the Warriors in that game. And they do the college thing where they stand up until the home team scores. So I think that was the perfect example of a team that you just build out a section behind the basket, and you start building your traditions. Like you said, it's going to be tougher to do with a team like the Knicks, the Lakers, the Celtics, that have a little bit more built up. But the Thunder, or if the NBA starts to expand, which is looking pretty likely here, to go to Vegas or back to Seattle, I think those are the perfect opportunities to try stuff like this.
The only thing I'd say is that NBA players have got quite a reputation for returning to fans whatever kind of abuse is sent their way, and rightly so. But like as an English guy, some of the soccer chants are downright sickening, man.
Yeah,
and,
some of them get a little aggressive. At least
Yeah.
From my experience with Austin FC, it doesn't quite reach that level. But I do know in certain English soccer games, it almost gets a little too personal sometimes. So I'm not advocating for those type of chants, but I do think that the atmosphere can be brought to another level with
to get the
like
drums, the vuvuzelas.
Yeah,
the
exactly. And
cannons
then
with the
we already
confetti,
got Greg. We got him on loan from Austin FC, so we can just get him out there.
I'd be for Greg, man. I love him.
Well, dude, you know what's so funny is I've had some people that like look at me around town like they recognize me, and sometimes I like to think it's from Black Sheep Optimist. Now I'm just wondering if it's this guy. If they just think that I'm this guy, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I know this dude from somewhere." Like maybe that's the guy from the Austin FC games.
Yeah.
We joked last night that you could actually go as this guy for Halloween, and it's going to be very niche, but it's going to be one of those like niche Halloween costumes that everyone's looking at you like, okay, you're just an Austin FC super fan, whatever. But like the 2 times that someone's like, your supporter section Greg, and you're going to be like, nailed it. And it's going to be this amazing feeling that you just made this person's day.
The only thing is this guy's like 120 soaking wet.
Yeah, I said 150 being generous.
Yeah, he's so skinny. He's so skinny. But yeah, I do look a lot like him.
Yeah, it is. We were with a bunch of our friends last night who we were looking for this guy. He wasn't out there in the first half, and me and Lorena, my girlfriend, were like, damn, Greg's not here tonight. That would have been cool to see him. He came in the second half. We were like, oh my God, it's him. It's a celebrity. And then we pointed him out to some of our friends who didn't know about this side of Greg's life, and they couldn't take their eyes off him. It's like even his mannerisms feel like Greg. Like this is Greg's double agent life right now.
I gotta go meet this dude.
Yeah, you've got to be like, bro, you look like me, and he'll be like, bro, you look like me. He'll be like, we're twins.
I know we're gonna have to arrange a meeting. We'll bring him on the podcast here. But that's gonna do it for this vibe check this week. That's gonna do it for this episode of Green with Envy. Our guy Adam has some dinner waiting for him, so we're gonna let him get out of here. But we'll be back this week with a lot of content across multiple platforms. So make sure that y'all are checking in with myself, Adam, Greg. But for this episode, Greg, let us know what we're gonna hear on the way out.
Just real quick, I'm going to be releasing a new video on our YouTube channel. I'm going to reimagine the Coaches Corner that we started doing a few years back. So make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel to check out that video. I'm going to be breaking down Jaylen Brown's, what I'm deeming the Apex Pass. So check that out. And with that, we're going to hear some music from my band down here in Austin, Texas. We are Black Sheep Optimists, and this one is called Skywalking. Peace, everybody.
Peace, y'all.